Yo, it's the Latino Newsletter podcast, a show about us all the time. I'm your host, Julio Ricardo Varela. A special thanks to the generous support from the Latino Community Foundation for season 1 of this podcast. Learn more about the Latino Community Foundation at latinocf.org. Okay, we are at that lucky number episode. Yes, that number 13. Yeah, it's lucky. I'll take it. People say it's unlucky. It's not unlucky. It's episode 13. And we have another fabulous guest to talk about Latinidad in 2024. Ana Valdez is the president and CEO of the Latino Donor Collaborative, the LDC. She is an American marketing, media research, and political expert and thought leader with 30 years of experience in business, media, and the corporate world. Born and raised in Mexico City, she has studied and worked in Mexico, Europe, and the United States. She has lived in Los Angeles, California since 1997. Valdez began her career at Nielsen, where she developed the company's largest market research client base. She then worked for Banamex, now Citibank, attracting multi-billion-dollar foreign investors and helping them identify the best business opportunities in the country. Since then, she has worked at the United Nations in Geneva, the Clinton administration in Washington, D.C., and has collaborated with companies such as Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Procter & Gamble, Pepsi, CBRE, Morgan Stanley, and McDonald's, among others. Ana, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Latino Newsletter.
Thank you, Julio. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, tell me what the LDC is doing these days, and just hit me with all the data that you can hit me at, because I know you've done a lot of reports. So give me all the data, all the reports.
Julio, beware. I may really overwhelm you. I am a nerd. Be careful with what you ask for. So anyway, as the Latino Donor Collaborative is a think tank that fully focuses on creating data that shows the economic impact of Latinos in this country. Why do we do this? Because there's a huge gap between the reality of who Latinos are and the perception and the stereotyping and the rhetoric and all those negative visions of our communities. We create this data so that not only we help create an image of who Latinos are in reality, but also so that all the resource allocators and everybody in the United States plans according to where the growth is coming from. And the truth is that the growth is coming from Latinos in this country. And so that's what we do. Again, data, what can I tell you? Just so that you know the level of growth that we're bringing to this country. If Latinos were an economy, they would be the 5th largest economy in the world. Just from what they are producing, the resources, the money, the services that they are producing in this country. And that's important because this GDP, Latino Gross National Product, which is actually $3.6 trillion, imagine if it was a country independently, it would only be smaller than the United States overall, China, Japan, and Germany. So that means that if U.S. Latinos in this country were an economy, they would be bigger than any other country except those 4. So Latinos in the United States are creating more wealth and more money and more products and services than the whole country of Russia, Canada, England, France, Brazil, any country except the top 4.
Why does the rest of America not know this?
So the rest of America doesn't know this because there's a thing called media that always, first of all, doesn't portray us, right? English media just doesn't have a lot of portrayals of Latinos. We actually create a report every year. This is the 7th year that we've been doing it. And unfortunately, it's a constant that only 3-point-something%, it varies every year, but in the level of the 3%, Latinos actually have a lead role. And what does that mean? It means that a community that is 20% of the population, 25% of all the youth, and 30% of all the babies being born only have 3% of the representation in shows. And the worst part is, Julio, that out of that 3%, half of it is negative. So out of that very little representation that we have in media, half of it is shows like Narcos and Mayans MC and Griselda and Queen of the South, which are entertaining, right? That's why they do them, but don't tell the story of 99.9% of our community. And so when you ask, why is it that people don't know these numbers? Media is the most important feedback that any person in this country gets, right? We, as you perfectly know, receive hundreds of thousands of images every day. This industry is actually, first of all, making us invisible. But when we are not invisible, most of the times we're negative. So one of the most important consequences of this invisibility, and then the few times that we're portrayed, this negative portrayal, is that people that have not met a Latino or that have no contact with a Latino believe those things. And as there are a lot of areas in this country where Latinos are not very common. I live in Los Angeles, so it's fantastic. I live surrounded by our community. But the Midwest or the North or some places in the South, they don't have the luxury, because I call it a luxury, the luxury of knowing a Latino personally. And when you only see very few portrayals and when they are negative in TV, you think that's the community. And I don't know if they do it on purpose or they do it because they just don't care. I don't know what it is, but what I do know is that when they have represented other communities better, and that makes me extremely happy because they deserve it, right? But when right now African Americans are given not enough, probably, but spots, right? Spots in content, in Hollywood, in advertising, it works. It brings business. So it's not charity really to portray communities, specifically not ours, because that other half of the 3% that is positive makes for some of the top shows of all the platforms. And I'm just going to give you very recent examples. This week, Lincoln Lawyer, humongous hit, number one show by far, right? This year you had The Last of Us and Will Trent and Andor and all these shows that when they are positive portrayals of Latinos, they not only satisfy Latinos, but they kill with other communities and globally. So it's really leaving money on the table not to have us, and it's creating this misunderstanding of who we really are in this country.
You raise so many great points, some comfortable, some uncomfortable. And I'm going to ask you the uncomfortable one first, which when we are in a multi-ethnic, multiracial society in the United States, there is this sort of attitude or prevalence that there's division between Black and brown communities. There are plenty of Afro-Latinos who would say that they identify as Black. There's a divide and conquer trade-off. How do you get that representation pie to increase with Latinos without coming across as saying we're going to advance and other communities are going to have to get used to it or they have to accept it, right? Because there is tension and there is a little bit of that.
First of all, you're right. It's an uncomfortable question, but it's a fabulous question for me because I do believe I have the answer. And I'm going to give you data because remember, my answers are always based on data. I'm the chief nerd officer. First of all, when African Americans and now Asians and now also Native Americans started getting their fair share, or if not the fair share, at least more of a share with entertainment, the market grew. That is actually a constant. And even though we haven't actually gotten a chance, there are companies, for example, our very good friends at McKinsey, that have made studies that show, and McKinsey just released their latest report in May, and they say if Latinos were represented in parity, the market would grow 12 to $18 billion. Julio, we're not actually in the business of taking anybody's share of the pie. We're in the business of creating a growth in the pie. You know that Hollywood is an industry in decline, right? Not because of moral reasons, but because of numbers, right? Companies' market cap has been cut in half. Most of the top companies of Hollywood, the market caps are in decline. Some of them are half of what they were 5 years ago. The market overall, the industry, according to Nielsen, has also been declining. And the truth is, entertainment and content doesn't decline. It's traditional Hollywood that is shrinking. Why? Because there are other places where people are getting their content from. And specifically, our community is fueling most of that growth, right? The growth on YouTube, the growth on social media. And I'm not going to say platforms because some of them are controversial, but all that growth. And if you talk to those C-suite people in those companies, the growth is being driven by Latinos. We don't see ourselves. We're not able to create our stories. We're not able to tell our history, right? In traditional Hollywood. So that report is so impactful because it shows the reasons why Latinos would actually make everybody grow if they were actually included. I always say that the growth in other communities is great news for us. One, because they deserve it. Their stories had to be told and they weren't being told. And not, again, that they are already achieved everything, but they're doing much better. And the second reason why it's good news is because if they did it for them, they can do it for us. Whatever system worked, whatever initiatives promoted the fact that the growth of those communities has been undeniable can be applied to ours.
The more comfortable question: how is it good for businesses, and are American businesses waking up to us finally? Are Latinos good for business, and are we proving it to American businesses?
Julio, I think that's the key of our conversation and actually of everything that the Latino Donor Collaborative does. Because this blind spot, the fact that we are invisible, the fact that this gap between the perception of who we are and the reality is costing a lot of money, not only to Hollywood, it's costing a lot of money to a lot of other places, a lot of other industries. And just think about the 10 to 15%, for example, with consumer products, right? Think about the 10 to 15% of brands that know the real numbers and act on it, and the other 90 to 85% that don't. And I'm going to give you examples of the people in the 10 to 15% that know these numbers. For example, in the case of beers, I am sure you've heard the amazing success story of Modelo beer.
This is the mark of a fighter. A rich, full-flavored lager with a crisp, refreshing taste.
I love the commercials.
There you go.
Okay, I do. I love the song.
The song is amazing.
I agree with you.
So yes, this group, American group, buys Modelo beer some 8-9 years ago. And they say, we're going to be unapologetically Latinos. We're going to go after the market of Latinos, and we don't care. And they start this incredible campaign. As soon as they buy the brand, they start this incredible campaign. The company is called, by the way, Constellation Brands. That's the company's name. And they start doing this unapologetically Latino marketing. And I don't know if you've seen those advertisements, but they're so amazing. They are very well done. And their stories, now they have expanded to other communities. But at the beginning, they were stories of Latino immigrants. And really cool music, really cool video saying that, Juan Gonzalez came to this country with nothing. And after so many years of hard work, really well done. And they had them at the Super Bowl, and obviously in English and unapologetically. Guess what? 8 years ago, they were number 18 beer in the country. Today, they're number 1. They sell more than Budweiser. And they say, and they're lovely in their candid comments. They said, we really honestly didn't expect that. We were going after the Latino community. And little did we know that we were going to cross over to everybody. And of course, T-Mobile is another one of the cases. And Target is another one of the cases. And L'Oreal is another one. So again, those 10 to 15% of the companies that know it are already killing. They already know it. They don't want anybody to know it because they want to continue being number one, right? The other 85%, 90% of the companies are little by little being irrelevant. And it is all about knowing where the growth is coming from. I'm not saying Latinos are better. I'm not saying Latinos are the only people. I'm just talking numbers about where the growth is coming from. So that's why when you ask me, why is this important for brands? Why is this important for people? This is important for every American because this blind spot is costing them a lot of money.
This is all really good. And again, we're going to link to all the reports. I know we shared a couple of reports. We did do the entertainment one on the Latino Newsletter. But here is the last honest question, Ana. Economic power, has that translated to the dramatic pause here, political power? Because I argue that it hasn't. Do you want to agree with me or do you want to challenge me?
Yes, I agree 100% with you. That, Julio, is the reason why we exist at the Latino Donor Collaborative, because we haven't arrived in the opportunities and the seats on the table that we've already earned, by the way. We don't need to earn anything. We already earned them, but we haven't arrived because there's such a big gap between who we are for real and the perception of who we are. That's why other communities now have 12, 13% of the boards, and we only have 3 to 4%. That's why C-suite there's only 2% of C-suite Latinos in this country. We're 20%, not only of the population, but sometimes 30 to 35% of the sales. So no, you're absolutely right. We haven't. And again, one of the reasons that we've talked about it here is media. But there's another reason, and that's a hard one. As you say, it's an uncomfortable conversation, and it's that we haven't built a voice. Some people say in other communities, power is not given, is taken, and they're not talking about a revolution. They're talking about using their voice and demanding their place on the table, their seat on the table, and we haven't. We complain amongst ourselves, there's not enough people, but we don't. And the truth is, let's face it, we succeed economically anyway. That's a good thing. The children of immigrants are now going to college. They have all the tools of their parents, plus being American. They're doing really well. That's one of the reasons why we are the top entrepreneurs in this country, because we may not get access, but we succeed anyway, because we find the business, because we're hard workers, because family helps. We have a lot of qualities. So we succeed economically. The GDP report says it, because the GDP report is that generation of immigrants is not even the young people that are coming up so powerful. So because of that, we're like, we may not have boards, but we have a great business. We don't have a voice. We need a voice. We need to start exercising our rights by speaking, by writing letters, by writing books, by voting, right? Even voting is a voice. By using our power with our pockets and our purses and saying, am I going to support this product / company / advertising / content that doesn't represent me or represents me horribly? Or am I not going to buy tickets for that movie because it's actually a futuristic show in Los Angeles where there's not a single Latino survivor? Am I going to do that? Because I don't want to do that. We shouldn't. We have the power again of our voice, of our writing, of our vote, of our purses and our pockets. Use it.
You have a final 15-second, 30-second thought that as we were talking in the back of your head, you were like, I have to tell them this before we wrap up?
I love that. I love that, Julio. Yes, and I'm going to go with the voice again. I would say that if I want to leave you with a thought today, is to use the power of your voice and to use the power of your purse and pocket. Walk the walk and prove those decision makers wrong. The ones that are saying, why do I have to include Latinos if they're anyway coming to this movie? if they're anyway buying my product. I already have them. So why would I actually make any change and include them if they're already coming?
Ana Valdez of the Latino Donor Collaborative. Thank you so much for being on the Latino Newsletter podcast with me.
Thank you, Julio.
Okay, so that's the first time I ever met Ana. I've ever spoken with Ana. I've been following the work of the LDC for years. I've been following the work that Ana and her team have produced with all those reports. And wow, it's just always nice to meet someone who's doing the work and thinking about the bigger picture in her lane. And then here's Julio in his lane thinking about the bigger picture and the work. And you get them together and we have this great conversation. And it's super honest and it's super real. And we need to do more of it. So the Latino Newsletter is produced and edited by me, Julio Ricardo Varela, and fellow New York Knicks fan of Boricua descent, Joaquin Cotler. Let's go, Knicks. Let's go, Knicks. And the mixing and sound design is also by Joaquin Cotler. Music by Cast of Characters via Soundstripe. You can now donate to us at the latinonewsletter.org and click on the donate tab. Or if you're on Spotify, you can donate directly from Spotify. And if you like what you heard, rate, review us, share this podcast, tell your friends, catch up on all previous 12 episodes. We are growing weekly, little by little, and I love it. But if you thought that was a great conversation, just share it. Tag us too on the social media, because we are at Lat Newsletter on Twitter and then the Latino Newsletter everywhere else. And you can also subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, iHeartRadio. We're on YouTube. We are also uploading our audio shows directly to our email subscribers at the latinonewsletter.org. So you can always subscribe to that. And if you really, really want to say something to me, you can send me an email at julio@thelatinonewsletter.org. All right, we'll be back next week, the week before the election. Peace out, y'all.